So close. This is the last tooling section. After we get through this, we're going to be able to write clean modular code and import modules from other developers to significantly decrease the amount of time it takes us to build new projects. It's pretty great, right? We're almost there. Two final rules with Browserify that we're going to cover in this section, one of which we've already covered. First, we import other files into the current file that we're working on by using the require syntax. Remember, if we expect to have access to any other library, component, anything in this file, then we need to require it. That includes React itself. Secondly, any code that we want to make available inside of our file to other files inside of our application needs to be assigned to the variable module.exports. That means if I want to export a function that adds two numbers, I would write something that looks like module.exports function a, b, return a plus b. So then any file inside of my application that required badge would get back this function right here. Okay. In almost all the components that we create in all of our React code that we write, we're almost always going to be exporting the React class that we create in any particular file. So let's go ahead and get started with that. And we're going to start inside of badge.jsx. Now remember, like I just said, this file right here is a total blank slate. We can't reference React and expect it to actually be there. In order to use React, we must first install it as an npm package and then require it into this file. So let's go ahead and do that. At the command line, we're going to install React by running npm install --save and then react at 0133. This last little bit on here, very important. It installs a very particular version of React that's going to work very well with our application that we're building here. So make sure that you get that particular version on here as well. We're going to go ahead and run this. It'll go through the install process. It's pretty quick. There we go. Cool. So now we're going to go ahead and require it into our badge file. At the top, I'll write var react equals require react. Cool. Simple enough. The next thing we need to do is make sure that we export the code that we wrote inside of this file. Export the React component that we created. So instead of assigning it to the local variable of badge, I'm going to assign it to module.exports. Now, any other file inside of our application that requires badge is going to get back a React class. That's exactly what we want. Okay. Next thing we'll do is start on thumbnail.jsx. Same deal as before. We have React in here, so we need to require React. The other thing we have to do this time is require badge as well. So at the top, we'll add var react, require react, and then var badge, require, and I know what you're going to want to type right here. I know you're going to want to type badge, and that's exactly what I want to type as well. But unfortunately, this is a little bit of a curveball that's coming through here. This is definitely one of the trickiest parts of using Browserify. So whenever we require a module that we installed as an npm module, whenever we install it using the command line, and then eventually it ends up in this folder called node modules inside of our project directory, we can require it into this file by using just the simple string react, just simple word. No additional extra characters in there or anything like that. And we saw the same thing in our gulp file as well. Remember, we required just gulp and gulp react and so on and so on. Unlike modules that we install with npm, code that we write gets required in a little bit differently. Instead of just writing the string badge, because that's the name of our file, we have to provide it the path to that file as well. So thumbnail is in the same folder as badge, and so we would write the characters that specify in the current directory. // means in the current directory of thumbnail, our src directory, find a file named badge. And you might be asking yourself, okay, well, this sounds like, kind of a weird distinction, right? Why is this the case? Why do we have to add this path in here for any code that we write and want to require? And the answer to that is actually, it's pretty simple. Node modules that we install are always uniquely named. So when we say require React, there's only one React module that we could possibly have installed. On the other hand, if I say create a new folder in here and I call it components, and then I create another file in here called badge.jsx, and let's just say that I've got 2 badges inside of my application, and that could totally happen, totally realistic. I could have 2 files named exactly the same thing. Well, if I did that and then wrote require badge, all of a sudden you're really putting Browserify into a tough spot. Browserify knows that there's 2 files in your project directory called badge, but which one do you want, right? That's the question here. You have 2 files. There's really no identifying way, or no solid way that we can say, oh, he meant to require the badge in the closest directory, not the furthest one, right? Browserify is unfortunately not quite that intelligent. So because there's no uniqueness check around files that you create, we have to specify the path to that particular file. All right, I'm going to go ahead and delete this components folder. Cool. So we've got React defined, we have badge defined. One last thing we got to do, we want to make sure that anyone who wants to get access to this code right here can do so, and we will make sure that's possible by writing module.exports. All right, looking good. We just got a little bit further to go. I'm going to open up thumbnail list, and we're going to do similar refactoring here as well. This component uses React and the component thumbnail, so we will require React and we will require thumbnail. And thumbnail, again, is a file that we created, so we need to specify the path to it. We'll say in the current directory, look for thumbnail. Finally, we don't want to assign our class to a local variable. We want to make sure that other modules can make use of this as well. So we'll replace var thumbnail list with module.exports. Okay, last file, down to app. Now, app doesn't actually export any code here, right? It only consumes code. It only consumes code from within our application. So within app, we don't need to assign anything to module.exports. Instead, we only need to require files into app. You're usually going to have one file that behaves exactly like this, and it's almost always going to be your root file, the thing that kind of kicks off or starts your application up. That particular file usually is going to be exporting any code, so we generally only have to do a bunch of require statements up at the top. For app, we only make use of React and thumbnail list. So we'll go up and say var React, require React, and secondly, var thumbnail list, don't forget the capital L, equals require, and then again, this is a file that we wrote, so we'll do in the current directory, thumbnail dash list. Cool, looking good. And now we're going to come down to the moment of truth here. Our refactor is all done, and all we need to do now is run our gulp file, have it crawl over our application, link all the files together, build the bundle up, and stuff it inside of our project directory here. So we can do that by just running the command gulp. And it looks like I was very lucky. I succeeded the first time. So you'll see we started the task default, and it finished default after 44 milliseconds. And now it's sitting here and waiting, just waiting for us to make any changes to any particular files. Now, if you didn't have this success right here, if you got an error message, I could definitely guess what it might be around. You might either have a syntax error somewhere, or you might have kind of a mislabeling of file names in here. I'm going to go over to thumbnail list really quick, and I'm going to go ahead and just delete that path lookup. And I'm going to save Gulp automatically recompiles in the background, and it looks like it threw an error here. The error says browserify error cannot find module thumbnail from blah 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 blah. So if you see an error like this, your first intuition might be, okay, I need to go jump into the file thumbnail, right? There must be something wrong in there. Well, not quite. The problem is that browserify can't find thumbnail in the first place. So the way that you usually troubleshoot this, and believe me, you will come across this error right here, or at least I do all the time because I make typos all the time. If you come across an error that looks like this, you don't want to jump into the file that it lists. You want to think about what files are trying to require thumbnail, right? Because that's what the problem is here. Some file is trying to find thumbnail, but it's got some typo or some incorrect path or something like that. So we know that in our application, only thumbnail list makes use of thumbnail. So we'll go to thumbnail list and say, okay, it's trying to require thumbnail. I forgot my path here. I'll put the path back in, save it, and boom, we get our recompile. Everything is happy. Terrific. Okay, so we can't quite open up our index.html just yet and check out our application. We got one last little step. So I'm going to go inside of index.html. Index.html is still looking at application.js, and that's not what our compiled application is anymore, right? Our gulp file, let's pop it open really quick. Our gulp file produces a file called main.js, not application.js. So now, instead of using application.js, I'm going to delete that, and I'm actually going to move this particular script tag as well. It's going to go just underneath this container element. I'm going to add script src main.js. So now, instead of using our outdated application.js, we're going to be making use of our new bundled application. I'm going to open up main.js here. I do not recommend that you do so unless you've got a hefty computer. So when I click it, you'll see this takes quite a while to open up. And the reason for that is that this is the absolute sum of our application. This is not only React, or not only our application, but it's also React and anything that React itself depends upon, all stuffed into one big, big file. And you can see me scrolling through here. It is as laggy as it probably appears. Let's see if we can find the number of lines in here. All right, so we got about 20,000 lines. So yeah, it's a pretty, it's a hefty file. The upside to that is that whenever a user loads our web page, instead of having to require multiple JavaScript files, they just have to grab one single large file and they're good to go. Okay, so I think we're ready for a test in the browser. I'm going to open up our project directory and open up index.html, and sure enough, our thumbnail list worked. Not bad. If you didn't get the thumbnail list popping up here, don't sweat it. Go ahead and open up the console, and if anything is wrong, go over to your console tab and see if you got any errors in here. You might just have a typo, might be incorrect, JSX tag, whatever it may be. If you have any issues and you troubleshoot it a little bit and you can't find what the solution is or what the problem is, don't hesitate to drop me an email or post on the forums. I'd be happy to give you a hand. Okay, so it's been a journey, but we did it. We refactored our app to use browserify and gulp. So let's do a quick wrap up here and talk about what we did and why we did it. So first, we had been stuffing all of our JSX inside of index.html and using the browser-based JSX transformer to compile all of our code into JS. This was great for getting started, but it was a bad solution in the long term because the file was getting really large in size and really hard to navigate. Second, we tried separating all of our files out and then automatically compiling them to JSX and joining the resulting files together. Now that didn't work because we ran into issue with the order in which our files were loaded, and we didn't really have a lot of good control over the order in which they were loaded. So we solved the load order problem by using browserify, which is a very intelligent system that, well, it's an intelligent system that figures out what order in which it needs to load all your files together. Next, we refactored our code to use the require and export syntax in all of our components. By using require, let me find a good example here. By using require and module.exports, Browserify is able to figure out what order it needs to load our files in. Lastly, we use Browserify by making a gulp file that automatically executes Browserify and watches our directory for changes whenever we make any changes to our development files here. Let's do a quick demo of that one more time here. I'm going to put in, let's say just, I don't know, some gibberish, right? And I'm going to save that. Gulp automatically recompiled our badge file. And if I refresh over here, we get this nice gibberish that pops up. Cool. I'm going to save that without the gibberish there. Okay, so again, this is I know is a tedious process, and I know that it may not appear to be super related to React. I'm sure some of you are thinking, you know, I signed up for a course about React here. Why are we doing all this crazy Browserify stuff? But I really want to stress here that just about any React-based development that you are going to work on at any company, any personal project, is going to use something like Gulp or something very similar, something like Webpack or Grunt. And they all really function upon the same exact principles. So I applaud you for sticking in here. In the next section, we're going to kick off with a really interesting app, and I hope to see you there.